Neuropharmacology. When I say that, do you get a stomach ache or maybe a headache since it's neurology? We are studying it right now in my pharmacology course, and it can be a little bit of a doozy, but I do want to go ahead and dive right in and hopefully help make a little bit of sense of it. So our book, Lens Pharmacology, defines neuropharmacology as the study of drugs that alter processes controlled by the nervous system. So really quick, I want to pause, and I'd like for you to think about something, a process in the body that is controlled by the nervous system. Did you come up with more than one? Probably. So yes, lots of processes throughout our body are controlled by the nervous system. Just to name a few, muscle control, somatic muscle control, that's our voluntary muscle. Smooth muscle within our organs is also controlled by the nervous system. Cardiac muscle is regulated by the nervous system. So when we say that neuropharmacology is the study of drugs that alter processes controlled by the nervous system, that's more than just one thing. In fact, it is the next 40 chapters, or it's through chapter 40 in our textbook. So there's a lot to understand when it comes to neuropharmacology. It's, I think, 38 chapters total. So neuropharmacology is divided into two categories: the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system. And our book says that we go into the PNS, the peripheral nervous system, first, because it's more easy to understand. Science apparently hasn't mastered the art of central nervous system neuropharmacology because it's a lot of variation from person to person. And a good way to think of that is like the drugs that are given for antidepressants or bipolar disorder or those kind of things. There's a lot of variation person to person in those drugs. So, first we're studying the PNS. It's important to remember that everything in our body is regulated by that central nervous system. Our brain is like air traffic control at Hartsville-Jackson. It's seeing the planes land. It knows who's circling up in the air. It knows who's taxiing. And it knows if there's a fire on a runway or anything that's going on. Your brain sees it, and it's responding to it all the time. The easiest way for me to remember that is just like the thermostat in my house. Have it set to 70 degrees. So when it drops down, it's winter right now, when it drops down to 68, that thermostat's going to kick on. And it has a sensor, and it's going to run that heat until it gets back up to probably about 71 if I have it set on 70, and then it's going to kick off. So our brain's just like that, and in fact, that's regulating the temperature control of our body right now in a very similar way. We have afferent neurons, and that could be maybe in my arm saying, "Oh, I'm cold." I have an external environment that has caused me to become cold, and that afferent neuron with an A, afferent, sends that message all the way up to my control center, to my brain, to my thermostat, which is actually located in the hypothalamus. My thermostat is. So my brain says, ooh, what are some ways, just like the nursing process, what are some options that we could use to respond to this external stimuli? So it says, well, we could shiver. We could have peripheral vasoconstriction so that the blood comes back to protect our vital organs. Or we could cause our little erector pili muscle to stand up. And what does that do? It gives us goosebumps. So our brain processes the ways that we could respond to being cold, and it sends a message back along an efferent neuron. Sorry. I'm telling you, I'm trying here. So we have afferent, bringing the message to the brain, the control center, and then efferent. And those are neurons. We also have afferent and efferent arterioles at the capillary bed. So our brain tells our body, or our neurons, how to respond. And that efferent neuron, it could definitely go to that erector pili muscle and say, I'm cold, or it could go anywhere. It could go to somatic muscular tissue. It could go to a glandular cell. It could go all over the body and cause lots of different things. So when we say neuropharmacology, we're not just talking about what's going on up here. We're talking about lots of stuff that is regulated by the body, by the brain. Sorry, I just got distracted with that cell phone going off. So neuropharmacology could be speeding the heart, slowing the heart. It could be expanding the bronchioles in the lungs or constricting them. It could be increasing GI motility, lowering GI motility. It could be me moving my arm like this. So our body has all these natural processes that regulate things. And neuropharmacology is introducing a new chemical into our body's regulation, our normal regulation. Because neuropharmacology is relying on that normal regulation and altering it. That's what we need to know. So, to sum this up, neuropharmacology, it ain't just up here. It's everything. It's altering it all. So you might see a drug that is a beta blocker is a great example. It's lowering the heart rate because it's blocking a receptor. We're going to get right into that. This is a beautiful drawing of a neuron. This is my neuron. That's its little nucleus. And it sends a message all the way down. This is the axon. And these are the axon terminals. So when my body, my brain, says we want to cause that erector pili muscle to stand up because we're cold. So my brain sends an action potential, which remember is just electricity, and that electricity is through ions. So it's sending ions, electricity, down the axon. And my little black squares, those are my myelin sheaths, and those are like insulation. So instead of that axon potential having to travel all the way down that plasma membrane of that cell, it jumps, doop, 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 doop. And that conserves energy, conserves that electric pulse. A disease that we've learned about is MS, multiple sclerosis. And that is where the immune system attacks those little black things, the myelin. And when that happens, the action potential is unable to travel normally down the axon. So when it gets here, the action potential is a lot weaker because it hasn't jumped. So when it gets here, this is my axon terminal. And when it gets here, it sends the message to the cell across the synaptic cleft. Now, what kind of cell is this? I don't know. It could be any kind of cell you want it to be. It doesn't matter. It could be muscular tissue. It could be glandular. It could be all kinds of things inside the body. And our body, our brain, has sent this all the way down from the central to the peripheral nervous system, all the way to the cell, and it's sending a message. That's the important thing. This could be another neuron. It could be sending this message across. Now, we have two types of drugs that alter the PNS. One type alters how this action potential travels down the axon, and those are called, I think they're just axon regulating drugs. Hang on just a second. Let's see. It's just, they regulate physiologic processes through axonal conduction. So when that happens, it's just making this, altering the speed or how this is conducted down the axon. These are not selective, so we don't use these a lot. They just change how every neuron, or lots of neurons, send their action potential. So if I introduce a drug into the body that changes the rate that the action potential goes down all my neurons, that's going to affect almost every process in the body. And what were the concepts of an ideal drug? One of them was selectivity. So this is not selective. Drugs that alter axonal transmission are not selective at all. So we don't really want to use them, right? Now, we get to this little guy, to our axon terminal. These, my little dots here, are neurotransmitters. And the important thing to take away from this, because I'm about to go to a new video, is that they are the ones that we're going to talk about, because they're the ones that our body uses, because they're selective. So an ideal drug with these bad boys, that synaptic transmission is what it's editing or altering. And those are our selective neuropharmacological agents that we're going to talk about, that we're going to use the most